Hello and welcome to this episode of the Blog Chronicles. I am your host, Matthew Loomis. This show is sponsored by buildyourownblog.net, the full-service destination for people who want to start their own WordPress blog and achieve long-term success. Visit buildyourownblog.net to start your new blog today. My guest today is now living the life of her dreams, working for herself on her own terms while creating work she loves to do. How did she do this? Well, she started a blog and worked on it in her spare time while working a day job in marketing that she despised, by the way. 3 years later, she was able to leave that full-time job to pursue a new career of self-employment as a designer and solopreneur. Her website, the one she started 3 years before leaving her job, is called positivelypresent.com, and it's a site dedicated to helping others live positively in the present moment by providing readers with fresh ideas and innovative advice for making the most of each and every single day. Along with becoming a full-time designer and blogger, she is also an author of the book, The Positively Present Guide to Life, as well as a variety of workbooks and ebooks, and she has been featured on sites such as The Happiness Project, Forbes, Glamour, The Huffington Post, and The Washington Post Express. So let's now chronicle Dani DiPirro. Hi, Dani. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So your current blog, positivelypresent.com, was started in 2009. Your 8th year anniversary of blogging just occurred on February 14th. Can you share with us what the purpose of your website is?
The purpose of Positively Present is to help people around the world live more positive, more mindful, and more self-loving lives. And the goal really initially was to share my personal experiences with struggling with those three things: being positive, being more mindful, and being more self-loving. And as it's grown, I've learned more about myself and learned more about those topics, and it's my goal to share what I learn and what I personally experience with my audience.
Sounds good. What niche would you say you're in?
I would say it's, the self-help, inspirational positivity niche.
Right, that would have been my guess. Self-help, that is.
Yes.
Yeah, and positivity, that sounds like a pretty cool niche too.
Yeah.
So, Dani, what drew you to this niche? Do you have any background in psychology, or what drew you to this?
I find psychology fascinating, but I don't have any background in it, professionally or educationally. What started me on this path was that I was kind of in a low place in my own life back in 2009, and I was really struggling with my job, with my relationships, with myself, and I just started to realize more and more that it wasn't really an external problem, because anytime I changed something, it still didn't really feel right. And that's when I started to do more research online about sort of happiness and trying to understand how to make your life better. And as I was doing that, it began to occur to me that it wasn't really happiness that I wanted. Ideally, I'd love to be happy all the time, but that's not really how I work or how most people work. Happiness to me is an emotion. It's something we experience, but it's usually pretty short-lived, even if something amazing happens. Whereas positivity is more of a mindset, an attitude, something that you can do no matter what. You can be having the worst day of your life, be in the worst situation, and still strive to make the most of it, to seek the good in it, to learn something from it. And I also really struggled a lot with being present. I spent a lot of time, and I still struggle with this, but I spent a lot of time in the past worrying about either what was going to happen in the future or dwelling on things that had happened in the past that couldn't be changed, and, wishing I could go back and undo things. And so that's where it really started. Was I was doing a lot of research, and I have always been a writer. So I thought, why not try to share my experiences with other people, especially because this is not something that comes naturally to me. A lot of people in the self-help space at least appear to, it comes more naturally to them. And I think, for certain people it does. Somebody, for example, is my mother. She's a very positive person naturally, and tries to automatically find the good and make the most of things. I personally am not. I have to really work on it. And so I wanted to kind of share that with people, because I know I'm not alone in that. I know that there are people out there that want to be more positive or want to be more mindful, but it doesn't, come as reflexively to them. So that was the goal with starting out. So I guess it was more from a foundation of me being a writer than it was from a psychology point of view.
Yeah, I did notice that you're a fellow English major. Welcome to the club.
I am. I am.
So you talk about also self-love, and we are going to get into that in a little bit, but you brought up kind of the dark beginnings of this blog, and I want to start there because you wrote a recent post that stood out to me. You called it the Great 8 Challenge plus 8 years of blogging. And it's a great post because you list 8 powerful things that have happened to you over the past 8 years. And there is a link to this post in the show notes for anyone that wants to read it. I thought each of the 8 things were great, and let's touch on, I want to cover the second one that you called the prove all the haters wrong thing that you discovered over this time. You wrote, I don't have a lot of haters, but there are some people in my life and even a little voice in my own head who didn't think I could do what I'd always wanted to do. Be an independent writer, not answering to a boss or going into an office every day. Through the power of the internet, I've been able to make my ideal work scenario a reality. I used to spend nights crying about going into the office, and I remember one guy in particular saying something along the lines of, "That's life, get used to it." Because of this site, I didn't have to get used to living a life I hated. So Dani, even though it's been 8 years that you've been blogging, do you ever still find yourself marveling at how the internet has provided so much opportunity for us?
Definitely. I cannot imagine life without the internet. I think I would have ultimately, knowing the type of person I am, I ultimately probably would have found some other way to be more creative, because I was working in marketing and it wasn't really creative enough for me. And I also am a very independent person. So I think I always would have struggled a little bit with the typical work scenario. And I think in the past, there were avenues for people to do different things, not be as traditional, but obviously with the internet and the growth of it and all of the amazing things that have come out of it, it's definitely changed my life. And I know the same for so many other people, and it's changing the workforce in general, whether it's through blogging or other things, just people being able to be more flexible, to work from different places. And I think there are a lot of amazing benefits of the internet. I also feel like there are some negative things when it comes to being positive and mindful, and how it can, present a lot of distractions, especially because when your job involves going on the internet or doing research, it's very easy to get distracted. But overall, I definitely, I can't imagine life without it. And, I had the internet when I was younger, but it wasn't the same as it is today. And it's amazing, and I love it. I'm very pro internet.
Absolutely. And I hear from people all the time that want to do what you've done. They're in a job situation. They're miserable. They dream of doing, working for themselves. They love to write, but they feel stuck. What would you say to those folks?
I would say, first of all, you really have to have something that you're passionate about. And I think being good at it is important. I think I'm a good writer. I don't think I'm the best writer in the world, but I think you obviously have to have some level of skill. I wouldn't say, oh, everybody can do what I do. There's definitely a level of skill involved. But I think more importantly is the passion behind it. And I think people kind of don't understand sometimes the flip side of having a blog or having an online business, how much work goes into it, how much you have to do that you don't have to do when you have a traditional job. Like you don't have to worry about a lot of times, finding your own health care or doing your taxes or all of these other things that, to be honest, I didn't really think that much about going into it. And there are certainly aspects of it that I'm just like, ugh, I wish I just had the normal job sometimes. Even the fact of having somebody, the things that I hated about my job, like having a boss, and, having somebody tell me what to do, that was something I really didn't like. But now sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish there was somebody to hold me accountable, because when you're doing everything yourself, you can say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll get to it then, or, there are definitely challenges. So I feel like it's very important to know yourself well, know what your strengths are, know what your weaknesses are, and definitely save a lot of money. I think you have to factor that in. That's part of the stuff that I don't love doing. I don't love the financial stuff or the numbers, but if you don't have that stuff in line, you can't do the other part, or you can't do it as well because you're constantly worried, or you're focusing on things that, aren't the best use of your time. And another important thing with that is the idea of, considering outsourcing things that you're not good at, so that you can focus on the things that you excel at, and not trying to do every single thing yourself. Maybe starting out, sometimes you have to, but I guess recognizing your strengths and limitations is really important if you want to do that, and really understanding what's involved, because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's so fun, you just sit at your house and write all day and it's amazing, but
in your pajamas, right?
Yeah. Yes, I am actually in my pajamas now, so that part can be true. I read tons of things where people are like, you should always get dressed every day, and I think, oh, I'm going to do that, and then I'm like, but I'm so comfortable. So that is a plus. You can work in your pajamas, depending what you do, and if you have, outside meetings and stuff. But I think also another factor that people don't always consider is the amount of time you spend alone. And this can differ if some people go to workspaces where there's a communal workspace, or they, depending on your job or the type of blog you have, you might go out and be interviewing people or interacting with people. But for what I do, I spend the majority of my time by myself. And for me, that's amazing. Like, that's ideal. I'd be fine being by myself all the time, but I think for a lot of people, they wouldn't like that as much as they think. You're thinking, oh, coworkers are so annoying and stuff. But for a lot of people, depending on where you fall on the introverted, extroverted spectrum, being at home all the time by yourself can be stressful and draining in a way that you might not expect. So I think keeping that in mind, and your personality type as you go into blogging, is really important as well.
I'm glad you brought up the introversion extroversion spectrum. I was going to ask you about that. That is a really good point, because even if somebody, I tend to be more on the introverted spectrum as well, but I have learned that I like to have an occasional interaction with real life people. Even though I enjoy working, for myself and by myself, that's just something that I like to find and schedule some time to do once in a while. Dani, when did you know, how young were you when you noticed that you had a passion for writing?
I would say 5.
Oh, wow.
I can remember the first story that I wrote, and just like, I still think about it, and I'm like, oh, I feel so proud of that. And that, it was a silly story. It was like one sentence. It probably didn't even make sense. But it's always been something I liked. I kept a journal as young as like 7. I started keeping a journal, and it's just always been a passion of mine. And I think just words in general, reading is also something I really love. And, on my Instagram feed, I do a lot of, quotes and inspiration. And, it doesn't have to be a story for me to love it. I think any kind of writing or, I guess, just creativity with the written word has always been appealing to me, whether it's something I'm creating or something that somebody else is creating. And I just love it. I think it's really important, and I think words are really, really powerful.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about content creation. What types of posts do you enjoy creating the most?
I think I enjoy creating the most posts that are relevant to something going on specifically, like if I'm writing about, and I don't write about a lot of like current events or pop culture, but I do feel like if there's something that's very relevant in my own life, like the post I just wrote this week about news anxiety and feeling overwhelmed by so much inundation with news and stress over it.
Hmm.
I think is really relevant to me and it really resonates with me. And then I find those are the posts where I really get the most from other people, whether it's interaction or just people emailing me and saying, oh, like I can relate to this. And so it's generally something that, because I feel like there's some posts where I'm like, okay, this is an interesting topic. I want to write about it and
Hmm.
I will, but it won't necessarily be relevant at that particular moment. But the ones that are really poignant to me at that time tend to be the most successful posts and the most enjoyable to write and create.
Okay, interesting. Um, when did you learn that you had a drive or a passion for design? How long ago was that?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to design things on my computer all the time. I would make little logos for myself. And the logo that I have now on Positively Present is actually sort of stemmed from the logo that I made for myself as a kid. Why I made myself a logo as a kid, I have no idea. I don't know what I thought I needed a
That's
logo
interesting.
for. Yeah, so it's definitely been a lifelong thing. I think I'm not, I guess, a traditional artist, so I never really went that route in terms of school. I took a few art classes in high school and college, but I was never like, oh, I could be an artist. And I never really knew what graphic design entailed. And I think, the rise of the internet and stuff and access to design programs has changed my life tremendously. But when I was
Mhm.
younger, I never really thought of that as a career path because I can't draw realistic things. I mean, like some people do, you see these amazing artworks in galleries and you're like, oh, well, I'm not that kind of artist. So
Yeah.
I never really thought about pursuing that until I was working on Positively Present. And when I left my job to go full time, I started, at first I would use images that I found on the internet and just source them or maybe add a quote on top or something. But the more I started doing that, I was like, oh, I could kind of create my own things. And I started, playing around with photography or taking a couple of design classes online. And the more I did that, the more I was like, wow, I'm really passionate about this too. I love
Hmm.
creating things and I especially love creating things that kind of go with what I'm writing about and making it really unique and not using something that somebody else has created. So the more I did that, then I just started taking more and more classes and actually learning how to do it. And then recently I got an iPad Pro, and that has been
Mm.
life-changing in terms of hand lettering and really quick graphic design that's already digital. You don't have to, scan anything in or anything like you would if you hand drew something. So yeah, I guess it's been kind of a lifelong thing, but in terms of actually bringing it into my career and making it something that is part of the blog that
Mhm.
happened after I left my full-time job.
Right. You're so passionate about the visuals that you actually started a design business. Is that right?
Yes, I did. It's called 23, and I do graphic design, and in fact that's where a lot of my income actually comes from now
Hmm.
is more the graphic design projects, which is a great point about blogging, that if anybody's thinking about starting a blog, you kind of don't know where it will go.
Mm.
And that's kind of the cool thing about it. I mean, unless you're a very specific thing, I guess. But I found that, you can kind of go down a different path if the ideas or the opportunities present themselves to you. And I just never really would have thought, oh, I'm going to have this design business on top of the blog. But that's one of the cool things about the internet, and
Yeah.
cool things about being a creative person is not limiting yourself.
Hmm.
As I mentioned before, the whole idea of like, oh, I'm not really an artist. I struggled with that for a long time because I don't find myself to be a traditional artist, and I didn't go to school for it, which I think a lot of people consider, oh, if you didn't go to school for graphic design, then you can't be a graphic designer. But that's untrue, and probably very untrue in other things as well. I mean, obviously, when it comes to, for example, being a doctor or a lawyer or something, you probably need to go to school for that and have a degree. But there are a lot of things out there, especially with, you know, the access that we have today, that people can learn and explore different avenues while they're working on, you know, whatever they're currently doing. Like when I was writing, I was learning about graphic design, and now I kind of merge them into one thing. And there are probably tons of things like that that people can do with whatever they're passionate about or interested in.
That is really inspiring. It's the do-it-yourself economy, really.
Yeah.
That's great. So, Dani, would you say the majority of your audience is female, or is there a balance?
Yeah, the majority is definitely female. I would say maybe like 25% male.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, because your visuals and your branding tend to kind of appear that way. You know, like you're targeting more of the female audience.
Right. Yeah, I kind of just do what I like. And I actually am surprised by the amount of male audience members that I do have, because I think, you know, and this is I also studied gender in graduate school, so I am very aware that, you know, the things I'm saying right now are kind of stereotypical, but yeah, it does kind of lean towards the stereotypical look of what you would think a female person would like. Yeah. Obviously, that's not always the case and stuff. And the content, I don't generally write anything that is female focused. You know, I don't write about, like, I don't know, I'm not a mom, so I don't write about motherhood, but like that would be an example of something. Or, you know, I don't write about fashion that's female focused. You know, sometimes I will mention things. Yeah. Like, I like this shirt or something, but for the most part, it's gender neutral content. And the design does tend to be, I guess, it's not even really female. I think it's just colorful. You know, like I don't use a lot of like flowery things, or like, cause I don't really like that stuff personally. It's more just like colorful things, I guess.
That is true. And you make a good point. When I visited your blog, there's plenty of content there that any male would find helpful and useful and good. So I just wanted to make sure any guys listening.
Yeah, if you're a guy, you'll still like it.
Absolutely. You should still visit positivelypresent.com. Dani, I want to spend some time on the topic of self-love, or loving yourself. This is something you have written about a lot, and you wrote a book titled Loving Yourself, an empowering workbook for increasing self-love. So let's start there and talk about it as it applies to bloggers. First, let's talk about what exactly self-love is. Can you define that for us, or share how you define it?
I believe that self-love is about acceptance with oneself, and this doesn't mean that you think everything about yourself is great. I think that we should always be changing, growing, open to new ideas, open to tweaking aspects of ourselves that aren't, you know, ideal. So self-love isn't just saying everything about me is amazing and I'm so awesome. Self-love is about sort of accepting where you are. It's kind of a mindfulness, but applying it to yourself, you know, being like, okay, this is where I am. Maybe I want to be somewhere different. You know, maybe I want to break this habit or do this in the future, and I'm going to work on that. But for the most part, you're trying to make the most of who you are, where you are, and in particular, make choices that are good for you. You know, whether that's people you spend your time with, what you do for a career, you know, how you spend your money, how you spend your time, like your free time, what you do for hobbies. I think a lot of people do things because they've always done them or because they're easy. And I think self-love is really about exploring how things make you feel and assessing whether or not things are really good for you or making you a better person.
Yeah, I think you could say it's about caring for yourself.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's, you know, the act of self-care, which I think people talk a lot about, which to me is more of the little everyday things you can do. Like if you're having a stressful day, then you take some time out and you take a relaxing bath, or, you do whatever's relaxing for you.
Hmm.
That type of thing I think is more self-care. Self-love to me is a bigger thing that is, as you say, like about caring for yourself as a whole. And I think a lot of people struggle with this because, and my next book is actually all about self-love, so I'll be talking about that in my next book. But one of the things that is troublesome is a lot of what we see in society, whether it be in advertising, even in, films, in music, even from
Hmm.
people around us, is encouraging us not to love ourselves. Because that's how things sell. If you don't feel like, if you feel, for example, oh, I need to have this certain look of fashion and clothes that in order to be my best self, then you're going to buy those things to make yourself feel better. Or, oh, I need to go on this special diet so that I feel this way or that way. A lot of stuff sells to us in society the
Hmm.
idea of, don't love yourself because you need this thing to make yourself love yourself. So it's very challenging to kind of access that self-love. But I think, being a personal blogger has been really eye-opening in that way, because I do write a lot about my personal experiences, and it's given me a chance to sort of be more introspective. And I hope to encourage other people to do that regardless of what they do for a living.
Okay, Danny, let me play devil's advocate here. Isn't self-love a selfish, self-absorbed thing to do?
I'm glad you brought that up, because it is not. And I think a lot of people struggle with it for that reason. They think, oh, I shouldn't be so obsessed with myself, or I shouldn't be
Hmm.
worrying so much about myself. I should be more selfless and care about other people, which I think is great. I think caring about other people is very important. But I find that it's very difficult to love anything, whether it's your job, whether it's your family members, whether it's your, loved ones, anybody, if you don't love yourself first, because you're always kind of in this internal battle with yourself and feeling, it's almost like an unsettled feeling. And I think a lot of people feel it, and they're kind of not sure why, even if they have all the pieces in place in like their life puzzle, they might not feel
Hmm.
good. And a lot of that is because they don't feel good about themselves. And the better you feel about yourself, the better you are at what you do, the better your relationships are with other people. A lot of, obviously comparison and jealousy and envy and those types of things come from not being in a place of peace with yourself.
Hmm.
And that can strain relationships. Like no matter how much you care about somebody, it's hard, if you don't love where you are and who you are, not to be envious if they're getting something that you wish you had, or, and those things put strain on relationships, even if they're not spoken, even if you just keep it inside. It definitely affects things. So my argument for that is that the more you love yourself, the better you are at loving other people.
Hmm.
And there's a huge difference between loving yourself and being narcissistic. Um,
Hmm.
I think people struggle with understanding the difference between those two things, but loving yourself doesn't mean that you think you're better than other people. It's a
Yeah.
it's a separate internal thing. It's not I'm so awesome that I'm better than all these other people. It's I'm so awesome, all these other people are awesome too. Whereas a lot of times I feel like people are saying, oh, all these other people are awesome, I'm never going to be good enough. And it doesn't have to be an either or. Everybody can be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great philosophy, and I agree with what you said there. It seems like a lot of times people that are really jerks, you find out that they don't really love themselves.
Definitely. I think anytime somebody is lashing out or treating other people badly, it really is something a lot of times that has been done to them that makes them feel bad, and they try to make themselves feel better by putting other people down, because they get that little boost of, oh, I'm better than this person, and you see a lot of that, especially online, when people can be anonymous, or they can say whatever they want, and you don't really have that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And you can see it. I mean, you can see people who feel at peace with themselves, who aren't trying to compete with other people. And that doesn't mean you can't be successful. It doesn't mean that you can't dress well or do whatever you want to do. But I think it's important, whether we're talking about positivity or self-love or any of these things, to really think about how it is for you, because it's not like a one size fits all thing. Like, do this one thing and you're going to feel better about yourself. And as I mentioned before, I feel like that's what people are trying to sell us, buy this product or have this lifestyle and then you're going to love yourself. But it's really an internal thing. And if you don't work on the internal stuff, you're going to struggle a lot. And no matter what you buy, no matter what relationship you're in, no matter, what you do for a living, you're still not going to be happy. So you got to work on the internal stuff if you want to have like a lasting, good relationship with yourself, because honestly, that's the only person that you're guaranteed to be with all the time. And right. I think we don't always think about it like that. Like, we got to work on our relationship with our partner or our friendships or our coworkers, which are all great and important. But like, you're the only person that you're with all the time. And you have this kind of inner dialogue going on at all moments, and you just kind of take it for granted and think, this is just me. But you can get more in touch with yourself, and it really does help other aspects of your life.
It's especially important for us self-employed people, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
You better love yourself.
It definitely is. Yeah, you have to. And you have to be able to be around yourself, and especially going back to the point about spending a lot of time alone, you're going to hear that inner voice in your head all the time. And you want it to be something that's encouraging you and helping you to move forward. And not that it's going to be that way all the time, or at least I haven't found a way for it to be yet. But, I think being aware of your thoughts is really important.
Yeah. So, Dani, do you think self-love affects people's willingness to try something new, like starting a blog?
Definitely. I think you have to be in a place where you believe that you have a chance of, some level of success, whether that's, your friends and family will read this blog, or whether it's, I'm going to make a business out of this. You have to believe that you have something to say. And I think without that self-love, it's going to be challenging to even begin. And that's another great benefit of self-love. Like when you feel like you're doing the right things for you, you can be more successful at blogging, no matter what kind of blog you have, because you're willing to take risks, you're willing to put yourself out there a little bit more. And that's really one of the things that works best when it comes to blogging, is being authentic. No matter what topic you're talking about, people can tell if you're being real, or if you're just, making lists that you copied from somewhere else on the internet or something. Like anybody could have a blog, but what makes certain blogs more successful than others is the real people that are behind them, and sort of channeling that voice, whether you're talking about, self-help, or whether you're, talking about something that to me would be more dull, like, a financial blog or something. You still can have a voice in there. I mean, that's part of the point of blogging, rather than just like, okay, these are facts. You kind of add that authenticity in there, and that's really where the success comes from. But it's hard to put that out there if you don't feel like your voice is worth hearing.
So, Dani, if somebody is hesitating with going into blogging, do you have any tips on how they can determine that it is actually a lack of self-love that's keeping them from putting themselves out there and starting a blog? I mean, how can they determine that it is a self-love deficit?
Well, I think you have to think about why you're hesitating. I mean, if you're hesitating because, for example, you're worried that people will judge you or they won't like it, that all comes from, looking for external validation from other people. And, you should be thinking about why you're doing something. For me, for example, I started my blog because a mix of wanting to help other people and wanting to help myself at the same time. And so I knew that even if no one read the blog, which, obviously when it started out, like not that many people were reading it, I was doing something that was working for me and helping me become a better person. And so I feel like if you don't have that, if you don't have some sort of feeling that what you're doing is good for you, it's going to be hard to put things out there and feel that it, proud of your work, or that your work is in some way useful or helping the world,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're only helping yourself. But I think you have to try to, everybody's going to be, I think, a little worried if you're doing a blog or putting anything out there in the world that, it won't be accepted or it won't be, enjoyed the way you want it to be. But I think you have to kind of take a risk and try to push those thoughts away a little bit and take small steps. You don't have to launch some, crazy endeavor right away. I mean, you can start a free site, right now, put something out there, see how it goes, maybe share it with some people that you trust, get some feedback. You don't have to go all in right away.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was just telling some folks through an email that blogging is one of the best and least expensive forms of therapy you can find.
So true. It really is, especially if you're in my industry where you're writing about self-help stuff. But it definitely is a great way to learn more about yourself. And don't be put off by, oh, I'm not a writer, or oh, I'm not this or I'm not that. Like, think about the example that I had before with the design stuff. Like, I wasn't trained as a designer, but now I do it. You can find ways to get better at it. I'm sure there's probably classes online you can take for writing if you think, oh, I'm not great at writing, or there's obviously classes you can take on learning how to blog and be a better blogger. So I feel like people need to use the resources that are out there for any areas that they might feel like they're weak in, or that they feel they're holding themselves back, whatever. I bet you there's even classes to how to build your confidence,
Oh, yeah.
So, wherever you feel like you're struggling, seek out a way to get better at that. And don't just say, oh, well, I'm not good at this. Or, part of the reason you're not good at it is because maybe you haven't tried it, or you tried it once and you didn't do great. And then you're like, oh, I can't do it. People that are good at things, it's cliche, but it's true. It's because they work at it. The design work, for example, I didn't suddenly say, oh, now I know how to use these really complicated design programs. I worked a lot over and over again, took classes online and practice because I liked it. But that applies to anything, whether it's blogging, or life. You got to practice. That's how people become good at it. And you can start anytime. That's another thing too. A lot of people do try to restrict themselves with the time thing, like, oh, I'm too old, or oh, I don't have enough hours in the day. Like, you can, if you want something badly enough, you can do it, no matter when you are in your life and how much time you have. I mean, people make it work all the time that have 5 kids and and somehow they do it, and you can do it too.
That is so well said, man. I have 2 kids, so
and look at you, you're doing things.
I'm doing things right.
Yeah, so I feel like there's almost everything. I mean, I can't think of them all right now, but any restriction you place on yourself is internal, and you can overcome it in some way. It won't always be easy, but if you really want something badly enough, you can find a way to do it.
So, Dani, you talked about going out and learning new things. What are some other things, a few other tips that people can do to raise their own self-love, their own levels of self-love?
Yeah, one of the most important things is to really think about the people in your life. And this is something that I discovered when I was starting Positively Present, is how important the people around you are. And there are some people that you are going to get a lot of negative vibes from that don't make you feel good. And the best way I've tried to figure this out is, like, when I spend time with somebody, after I leave that person's presence, like, how do I feel? And a lot of times it's very clear. You either feel drained, stressed, like, oh, that was a lot, I need to lay down, or you feel like, oh, wow, like, that was fun, I laughed a lot with that person, I had a really good time. And obviously this is not to say that every moment with every person is going to be great. Like, you're going to have bad moments with people, especially if you, like, live with them or you're with them all the time. Yeah. You're going to get in fights, that's just life. But overall, like, how does that person make you feel? And you'll find that some people are not making you feel good. And those people you've got to get rid of. That's a self-loving thing. Now, you can't always get rid of them, completely. Like if it's somebody in your family that you have to see, or somebody you work with, like a coworker, and you've got to work with them. In those cases, you can limit your time with them, or try to learn something from them, or learn something from the interaction to make it positive for yourself. But there are some people, especially if it's like somebody that's an acquaintance, or if you're doing freelance work or something and it's a client that's really negative, that you don't have to be around. You can choose to make those decisions, and it's not always an easy thing to do, but the people around you is very important. Also, how you spend your time. There's a lot of people, myself included, that spend a lot of time online, doing things that maybe aren't the most productive or the most fulfilling. Sometimes it's tempting to just be like, let me just go down this rabbit hole of Twitter and like look at all these tweets for like 4 hours.
Right.
And that's fine every once in a while. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think being mindful of how you spend your time and how it makes you feel, because you really do only have a certain amount of time in a day. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I don't have time to do the things I want. And it's like, okay, but did you have time to scroll through Facebook for an hour? Yeah. So maybe you could use that hour for something else. Just being very aware of what's going on, whether it's what you're doing, who you're with, your thought patterns. And that takes practice. So I think if you're just like kind of getting started on a self-love journey, you've never really thought about it before, it's not going to come overnight. You're not going to be like, oh, I fixed everything. It's an ongoing thing. And the way to kind of channel that and keep working on it all the time is to really cultivate awareness of what things are making you feel. Like even your own thoughts, like, is the thought, waking up and being like, I have such a stressful day today. Oh, I have all these meetings that I don't want to go to. Like, is that helpful? Not really. You're still going to have the meetings. Having that attitude is holding you back. So, and a lot of us don't even realize that. Like, we don't even think, oh, I'm having this thought that I could maybe change if I wanted to. And make it a little bit better. Like, oh, this is going to be a stressful day, but I'm going to make the most of it, and tomorrow I've got a free day and I can't wait for that. Kind of that attitude would be better. It's not going to change things, but it will make it a little bit better.
That's good stuff. You're such a good resource on self-love. You said you've got a new book coming out on this?
I do. I'm in the process of writing it, and I don't have a date when it's going to be released quite yet, but I'm really excited about it because it's a topic that I feel really passionate about, and I think it's important for people to recognize kind of what self-love is, and like you brought up a point about it being selfish, sort of understand that it's not, and also see the benefits of it. And it's going to have workbook elements in it so people can use it to actually take action and to write down their thoughts in there. And so it's not just like, oh, read my words and then figure it out. Like, it'll be more like, here's some ideas and write this down here and think about this, so that people can take what I'm saying and what I've learned and try to apply it to their own lives, which is really kind of the goal of what I do at Positively Present in general. I really want to make what I do something that people can use, because we're not all me, and we can't do everything exactly the way I do it or feel the way I do. So I like to create things that people can say, all right, well, how do I feel about this aspect in my life? And maybe, here are Dani's tips, but how could I apply that to where I am in my situation? So that's my goal with this upcoming book. And also a lot of my previous books have the same kind of feeling.
Yes, there is a link in the show notes to Dani's Amazon author page. And also, Dani, if somebody wants to kind of keep track of the book and how it's coming along and when it's coming out, should they go to your website and opt in, or what should they do?
Yeah, Positively Present is a great resource, and Instagram is something that I love a lot, and that's where I tend to share things that are upcoming or little sneak peeks of things. So that is also on my blog. Right at the top, there's a little Instagram button, so you can click that and then follow along there.
So people can follow you on Instagram. Anywhere else?
Oh yes, every social media platform, I'm into it, and all those buttons are on the top of Positively Present as well. So there's Facebook, and Pinterest is another one. As we kind of talked about, I really love the visual stuff. So Instagram and Pinterest are my most popular ones. Facebook and Twitter, I'm not a huge fan of them as much, but I do have them. But anything visual is really good for me. And then obviously the blog for reading the full blog posts. But when you're following along on those other sites, it will always alert you like that I have a new blog post, so then you can go check it out.
That's great. Dani, before you go, I want to circle back to my last question, which I like to ask my guests. And the question is, how has blogging changed your life?
Blogging has changed my life in every aspect. And part of it is because of the type of blogging that I do, as we talked about, like the personal growth and the stuff that's very much an internal thing for me. What I write about impacts how I feel about myself and how I feel about life. But it has also changed, very tangible things as well, like my career. I would have never imagined that I would go down the path that I'm in. When I was younger, I definitely thought, I want to be a writer. I envisioned maybe a journalist approach or writing novels because we didn't have blogs when I was a kid, so I didn't even know. But there's something so wonderful about blogging that I think anybody who's considering it or doing it is aware of, and that's freedom. When you're running a blog, you have the freedom for the most part, depending on the kind of blog, I guess, but to write about what you want, when you want. It's instant, which is so cool. Like if you think about back in the day, if somebody's like, I want to write this article, you've got to send it into a newspaper, see if it can get published, or even if you worked for a newspaper, maybe they didn't like the idea, whatever. But with blogging, you can write about anything you want, anytime. You can incorporate new things. Like, for example, the self-love aspect, that's a huge part of my blog now. When I started out, I didn't really, I thought about self-love personally, but it wasn't, part of my brand. So you can expand, you can grow, you can try different things. And that's one of the things that I think is so valuable about blogging, is that no matter what you're interested in, you can combine it and create things that are relevant to you and help you, with your own internal growth. But they also will help other people, and people will relate and be excited by the things that excite you, because even though we're all unique, there are certain aspects that we do all connect on. And having the freedom to write about and do what I want is one of the greatest things about the blog. And I think that's one of the greatest things about blogging in general, because anybody can start one right now and do anything they want with it, and it can turn out to change your life. So if you're thinking about starting a blog, I would highly recommend doing it, and just see how it goes. Don't be overwhelmed. It doesn't have to be this huge crazy business right off the bat. Maybe that's your end goal, but even if it's just a hobby, it's really enjoyable, and it's great to have the freedom to do what you want. So yeah, do it.
Well said.
Thank you.
Dani, thanks for coming on the Blog Chronicles today and sharing your story with us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Blog Chronicles. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe on YouTube or iTunes and leave a rating or review to help other bloggers find us. If you want to chat with me, look me up on Twitter @MattLoomis. So who is going to be my next guest on the Blog Chronicles? She's a blog coach for authors and an author herself, a social media consultant, WordPress trainer, and works from her home in the beautiful country of Canada. Come join us next time on the Blog Chronicles.